My company's going remote because of COVID. How do we transition our culture over?
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Hey there, this is Ben Eubanks, host of We're Only Human, and today's episode is going to be a little bit different, trying out a new format for a little series we're doing here around things like careers, Q&A, answering questions from the audience, trying to tackle some of those things that are coming in pretty regularly. And so I respond to a lot of things via email, and one of my lifetime rules is if I see a question 3 times, it's worth sharing publicly, sharing more broadly. And so some of the questions and things that are coming across, I answered this question yesterday, I'm going to answer it tomorrow probably, so let's answer it in a broader fashion, not just a quick email, text response, but a broader fashion, and then share that with everybody else. So that's the format we're going to be doing here, answering some questions, tackling some things that are coming in, helping people that are dealing with a lot of different things right now. So I'm excited about this. It's going to be, a series running in the midst of the normal podcast episodes that are going to be coming out on a regular basis. So we'll be splicing these in so you can catch some of this, adding a little different flavor to that. So if you like the interview style, you like the format where the guests come on, I get to grill them and ask them a lot of questions on your behalf, on my behalf, then those are going to continue. Don't you worry. But I want to try this out because there are so many good podcasts in HR, but none supporting this very clear need. And what's interesting is I listen to a lot of things in business and in marketing and in leadership, and those things are all great and broad and generic for our perspectives as HR leaders and talent leaders and learning leaders, but they don't dig into those things that we might need more specifically. So I'm excited to dive into this. The quote of today is this by Kahlil Gibran: "Work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and go sit at the gate of the temple and take alms from those who work with joy. For if you bake bread with indifference, you bake a bitter bread that feeds but half man's hunger. And if you grudge the crushing of the grapes, your grudge distills a poison in the wine. And if you sing as though angels and love not the singing, you muffle man's ears to the voices of the day and voices of the night." I love that quote. Again, that's Kahlil Gibran. I love that quote because, transparently, I love what I do. I'm thankful every day I get up and get to do something that excites me and I feel brings purpose to my life and brings purpose and value to a lot of people out there in the world, including you if you're listening to this. My hope, though, is that you can say the same. That you can say that the work you do does bring you joy. Is every day perfect? Probably not, right? Every day's not perfect for me. Are there things that you don't enjoy, you have to do in the middle of all that? Yes, sure, that's a part of life. But one of the things I was telling someone recently, I had a chance to mentor. I'm mentoring a lady that's transitioning from recruiting into HR, and she's looking for advice and support. I'm trying to give her what I can based on my perspective of the world. And she said, "I just don't feel like there's room for me." And I said, there's always room in the world for people that are passionate about what they do. The world somehow makes room for those people. So if you're one of those people that's really passionate, there is room for you. Don't you worry. So the show today, we're going to dive into 3 questions. Number 1, we're going remote because of COVID. How do we handle that culture transition? Great question. I'm getting that a lot, so I'm going to knock out a lot of questions that people are sending in around that conversation of remote work, culture, things like that. Number 2, we're a small firm looking for a new payroll tech. It is so confusing. Please help. And with 9 exclamation points on the please help. We'll talk about technology a little bit. That's one of the things I get to do every day in my work at Lighthouse Research, and so I'm excited to talk through that. And then last, the question we're going to tackle for a wrap up today is, how do I leave a toxic workplace? How do I get out of there? So thank you to those of you that sent questions. You can send yours in if you have something, and again, you're listening through the discussion today, you can send this in. I'll make sure and give it at the end as well. But questions@upstarthr.com. You can send in an email question to questions@upstarthr.com. Or if you want to record a voice, a little audio message, you can do that on your phone, on your mobile device. That one is just go to upstarthr.com/question. That's upstarthr.com/question, and you can leave an audio question there, and it will come straight to me. We'll try to weave those in as we're going along. Hoping to feature some of those coming up soon, just to add, again, a little personality, a little touch to some of the questions that are coming in, make them a little more human for us. So let's go ahead and dive into these things. Number one, Amrutha says, we are going to be a remote company after COVID. You are not alone. I'm watching the headlines, Amrutha, and lots of companies are making that transition. The ones that can, some companies obviously can't do that because they require a physical presence, but for the ones that have some flexibility, they're thinking pretty seriously about that idea of going remote and what that takes. Her question, though, is how do I communicate our culture for remote hires? And that is a tremendous question. That's really great. So let's dive into that. Let's talk about that piece a little bit. If you're going to be remote, how do you handle the culture piece? First of all, if you are one of those companies that's thinking about that, you've gone remote, you're thinking about whether to stay that way, you're trying to understand those different nuances and everything else, on the Lighthouse Research and Advisory blog about a month ago, I actually published this meta-analysis of 10 different research studies. And if that sounds really nerdy and painful to go through, don't worry, it's not dry and academic. I take a look through the perspective of you as an individual worker, what that looks like for you, and what that looks like from a company perspective, how to think about that. All right, a couple different things that I cited in there, for example, were Microsoft's new research that looks at your mental. They did an MRI of someone that's going through a Zoom meeting, through a video conference call, and they found that at a certain point in time, which is about 40 minutes if you're curious, your brain, your attention, your focus, all that just drops off the chart, just dives. If any of you are going through those days where you have seemingly endless calls, or your kids are in virtual school that's lasting 6 hours a day, guess what? They're not getting most out of that, and we can tell now with some actual data. One of the other studies, though, that was a fun fact for you. One of the other studies I talked about in there that I ran across that was really intriguing looked at some of the data from companies in the last few years that have gone remote, have transitioned to a more remote environment. And what they found was if a company had a core hub or set of employees that worked in a physical space, and the rest of the workers were spread out, remote, the people who were remote felt disconnected from the company. Not just physically, but like emotionally disconnected from the company because they were not part of the quote unquote in group. They were out there by themselves like islands. And so a good thing could be potentially if a company is going fully remote. If a company said, hey, we are closing the headquarters, we're pushing everybody out, they can work from their home office, they can go to a co-working space, they can work from wherever they want to because they're not coming into a main location anymore. It could reset that, hit the reset button on how that feels to be connected or not to the company. And if everyone is remote, guess what? Everyone's going to feel the same amount of connectedness, and then you can approach that from that perspective. It's much harder when you have pockets of people. Some people might be in a location. This little group meets together face to face, but the rest of your people are separate. That makes it really hard to tailor that and support them in certain ways. So having that for this company, for Amrutha's company, we're going remote. There's a couple ideas for you based on that research piece. Again, if you're curious, that full thing is 10 plus studies tell us about a post-COVID workplace. I'll get that in the show notes so we have that there. Amrutha, the rest of your question though is how do I communicate our culture for remote hires? Communicating culture is this thing that companies often do a really poor job of, frankly. And I'll admit, I've done that poorly in the past, but I've learned my lessons, and I learned a trick that worked for us, and so I'm going to share that with you now. The trick is, don't talk about culture in terms of fluffy, amorphous terms that no one understands, or that everyone thinks they understand, but really no one agrees on. So if you say something like, honesty is our culture, well, someone's like, I'm going to be brutally honest and tell you something that even if it hurts your feelings, I don't care. And other people are like, I'll tell you the truth, but if it's something that might make you upset, I'm just going to shy away from that. All right, so honesty means something differently for different people. So instead of talking about it in these terms that are, and I use honesty because it's one of those things we think is black and white. It's very specific. We know the answer. We don't know the answer. It is or it isn't. And even that can be gray. And that's much less something more broad or vague, like a fun working environment, which, again, everyone might think a different thing about. The thing you've got to start doing, instead of talking about culture in terms of those fluffy terms, is to talk about it in terms of behaviors. If you use a term, for example, one of the last companies I worked for in HR capacity, amazing company, we had a phenomenal culture, and that all was rooted in the core values that we all believed in and supported from every level of the company. not just the leaders spouting that, not just me as HR repeating it like a parrot, but all of our employees could tell you a couple of them, not all of them, a couple of them, the core values, because they found one that mattered the most to them. They latched onto it. So we had these core values. And the most important thing, though, was actually looking at the behaviors. How do we know what matters? Let's look at behaviors. Let's explain what those look like. So I used to choose these things, these stories that I called our legends, our culture legends in the company. And I'm going to tell you about Bo really quick. So our number one core value as a company was on-time delivery, on time every time. Without fail, that was a requirement. That was like our ultimate pass-fail mark as a company. And one of the reasons for that being our number one was one of our big customers we served was the special operations community in the military. And so these individuals are running missions, things like that, and their actual requirement or their motto is on time plus or minus 30 seconds. So they've got a really tight window to be considered accurate for their work. So when we are supporting them, we're building a product, we're doing services, we're doing any training, things like that. When we're supporting them, we had to be on time. If we were 6 weeks behind on delivery, are they going to be on time plus or minus 30 seconds? Absolutely not. So we had to keep those things in mind as we're figuring out how to solve that. So going back to Bo. So Bo was the story I used to tell. Bo was the story I used to tell when I was trying to explain to a new hire what it meant to be on time at our company. Because I didn't want them to hear on time. Okay, well, it's nice for us to be timely and punctual. No, that's not enough. That's not hardcore enough for us. So Bo's story, he had worked with this customer, one of our engineers. He had worked with this customer for several months, building out this simulator that trained pilots on how to fly an aircraft, which is just as cool as it sounds. It was an incredible piece of work. And he had the customer come up. They had signed off. Everything was perfect when they came and tested it out at the office. They took it apart, packed it up, took it back to their location a couple hours away. Inevitably, when they set it up, it did not work. They plugged it in. It would not turn on. It wouldn't do the right things. So they called Bo. Hey, it's Friday afternoon. I know it's late, but we have to have this up and running on Monday morning. We have a couple hundred students that are going to start churning through this thing. Next week starts test week, and we need this thing working. Bo's boss was gone for the day. The CEO had already gone home for the weekend. So Bo got in his car and drove down there to the customer site. And he spent all night, Friday night, with him working on it until the wee hours of the morning Saturday, and finally got it solved, sorted, fixed, repaired. Monday morning, they were ready to go. But Monday morning when Bo showed up for work, his boss said, hey, the customer called me this morning. Their students are taking this. What happened? What's going on? They were so thankful for you, but I don't even know what happened. And he had to tell them, like, hey, I spent the weekend there, so on. That story, though, became the example I gave because it didn't just say we believe in being on time, but it was about showing the actual behaviors. Here's what it takes. Here's as high of a standard as we'll put out there on what it takes to be on time, how much effort we can put into this, and basically saying within the ethical bounds of work, the moral bounds of work, there's no distance you can go that's too far for that. All right, so that's an example. One other thing I'll say, though, the reason I didn't just use terms or say it's important to be on time, right? Those things, there's actual research that shows we remember things, if it's wrapped in a story, better than if it's just a series of facts or a bunch of numbers or someone's opinion. So wrapping that in the story helped make that one and all the other examples of our corporate legends, our stories, our employees who did these things and lived them out and lived out those behaviors that we were looking for. That was a way that I was using for even if someone, again, wasn't starting in our home office, they were starting somewhere 500, 1,000 miles away, I could tell them that story and they would understand, okay, being on time is not just a nice to have, it is the critical differentiator for who we are as a company. Because we worked in a space, honestly, that was pretty familiar, pretty comfortable with slipping schedules and being late and just making excuses for those kind of things. And that was not something we were okay with as a company, and our leadership hammered that home every chance they got. So Amrutha, there's an example for you. Make it about behaviors. Talk about behaviors for your remote hires, the things that you're looking for as a company. Whatever your values are, get past those buzzwords and get into behaviors and examples. Look for examples of employees. If you don't have those examples at your fingertips, guess what? You can actually do a quick survey of your existing employees. If you want to use a tool like Google Forms, it's absolutely free. I know Microsoft Teams has some capabilities there. It's free if you're already using those. Do a quick survey of your people saying, these are our core values. Tell me a story about when you did one of these things or when one of your peers did one of these things. Give them a chance to tell on their peers in a good way, to recognize them for doing something good. And you can have fun with that. You can do a lot of good things with that, but you can also use those stories to highlight those values, the culture for those remote hires you're bringing in. And don't wait until they're hires. Goodness, start telling them when they're candidates. Start telling them in your recruitment communications, your marketing communications from a recruiting perspective. When you're posting a job, tell a story about someone who's done those things. Make people feel connected to that culture before you ever have a conversation with them or interview or before you offer them a job. That's a piece of that for sure. Okay, great question, Amrutha. Number 2 here, let's tackle this one for Nicole. She said, let's go in the technology direction. So she said, we 150 employees, we're just moving over into our first payroll solution. We'd been using a PEO, which if you're not familiar, if you haven't heard of that, it's basically a company that you can partner with to help hire and pay and manage your employees so that you don't have to have a full-time payroll person and a full-time benefits person and a full-time yada supporting them. You can use a PEO to help you handle some of those things if you're really small and you don't have that bandwidth to do it. But they got to the point where they said, hey, we want to move off the PEO, have a little more hands-on approach. We want to buy some payroll technology to help us with this. 150 employees. This question is actually harder to answer than that first one or the last one that's going to come up after this, because the challenge is I don't know a lot of details about her company. I don't know if they are at 150 employees, they've been there for 10 years, they'll be there for 10 more years, if they're static in their growth, if they're at 150 on their way to 900 because they're acquiring a new company next month, or they're growing quickly, or their space is really hot right now. There's lots of things in there that I don't know. I do not know what kind of industry they're in, what other kind of requirements they might have that might push them one way or the other. Just knowing what I'm hearing here, we're at 150 people. Let's assume they're going to stay at that size for a while. This is their first leap into a new piece of technology they've never done before. They're going off of that. A couple different things, a couple different examples of companies that serve that small market really well. Bamboo HR does a good job there. People Guru does a good job. You might look at a Paycom or Paylocity, right? Those companies serve that small end of the market really well. Now, if you're 500, 1,000, 2,000, that starts to change that conversation. You start to outgrow some of those solutions that might be really oriented at that smaller end of the market, and you start to need some more flexibility than they can give you. That doesn't mean any of those companies I just mentioned are bad or wrong or don't do a good job. That just means that as you change and grow as a company, you start to grow new needs for things like recruiting technology, or growing into a need for some learning tools to help you manage the learning of your entire organization. So that's one piece of that puzzle. That's one thing to keep in mind, is as you're growing, as you're changing, your needs will change, and that's just a part of this. Any decision you make, it feels very permanent, right? It feels like you're locking things in forever. But the truth is, those things can change. You can move away if you get to pick a system that's not amazing. And these questions are really complex. So when someone posts on the Facebook group, hey, who's the best payroll solution? Goodness, there's so many factors there. It's really hard to dig into that in just a Q&A. That's why there's a work like people like I do, where we actually help you figure out what's out there, what's available, what their capabilities are, how that meshes with your budget and also your needs from a company perspective, those kinds of things. Does their payroll work if you have employees who are working in London and other parts of the world? Does your payroll work if you're based here in the United States? So again, lots of different nuances there, variability. If you want to talk more on the technology side, if you're curious about that, if you heard that and you're like, I want to dig deeper into that, please ping me, shoot a question in. I'd love to talk more on the tech stuff just because it's what I get to do every day. I run a live stream show every week called HR Tech Talks. I love digging into what's happening on the technology side and looking more deeply at how that can help us to serve our people in a better way. And our last question for today is, how do you resign from a toxic workplace? I'd say the first thing you do is you set fire to your desk. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Please don't take me up on that one. The reason for this question, there's a couple different pieces to this one, and it's really hard to, again, untangle without knowing some more of the details. One of the things I would say is, one issue is when we're in HR, sometimes it feels hard to resign because we are an integral part of how the business works. And I would say to you, think back to that quote that I gave you earlier. If you're not doing work that you love in a place that you enjoy, or working with people that help you bring out the best that you have to offer, then it might be time for you to think about going somewhere else, looking for another place, looking for another opportunity to work at a place that does fit who you are and what you want to do and who you want to be from a work perspective. That said, if you want to resign from a toxic workplace, keep a couple things in mind. Treat people like you want to be treated. If you're a manager and someone's going to resign, you'd want them to give you a notice. Toxic workplace, that might be code for these people are jerks and they're going to fire me the minute I tell them I want to leave. That may be the case. What you need to do is be aware of how they've handled this in the past. If you saw someone in another team turn in their notice last month and the next day their desk was cleaned out, they were gone, that may happen to you. And if you need to be prepared for that, have your things together, have all the pictures off your hard drive or whatever else you need to do to make sure that a family picture or stuff like that, make sure you have those things downloaded so that you're ready to go in case they do say you're done. That happened to me in a previous company, and it really hurt actually, because I had turned in my notice, but I had several projects ongoing, and my commitment was, hey, I'm going to actually work a 3-week notice. Plenty of time for you to find someone else. I'm going to actually work and finish these 2 projects I'm doing. Make sure the customer's not hanging. Make sure you're not left on the lurch. I'm going to support this to the very end. And the manager's okay, no problem. That's just fine. 3 hours later, that evening, that Friday night, I got a note saying my email couldn't connect to the server. Okay, they've locked me out and I'm done. Right? That hurts. But if you've seen them do that to other people, you should expect that. I would plan for the best. I would hope for the best. I would hope they'd give you a chance to work that out. I hope they'd give you a chance to do the professional thing, finish your opportunity there at the company before you move on. Hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Plan for them to kick you out immediately. If it is again, an example, or the question that we got here from Maria is this toxic workplace. And toxic could mean a lot of things. If that's part of what you mean, then I would be watching out for that. There's a lot of nuance there, but I do wish you the best, Maria. I hope that you can get out of there. I hope you can get to a company that does appreciate you for who you are, for what you bring to the table, for your capabilities, your strengths, your values, your dreams, your passions, those things that you bring that no one else can do just like you. So thank you, Maria, Nicole, and Ruth. Thank you for your questions. For those of you listening, again, if you're like, hey, I want to ask a question too, please do it. I'd love to have your question featured here. It can be anonymous if you prefer that. There will be a link in the show notes for you to submit your questions. You can visit upstarthr.com/listen if you want to do the voice note, or you can send an email to questions@upstarthr.com, and we'll look at getting that into an upcoming episode in this series. We've got a couple more episodes already planned out. We're going to be answering some of these questions, helping you out, giving you some inspiration, some encouragement. It is a tough time in some ways in this space. I'm thankful that I've seen the unemployment rate continue to drop down. I'm seeing more stories of people that are getting work, getting back into the workplace. I'm so excited to see every time one of those notifications pops up or a friend says, hey, I got a job, let's celebrate together. I'm so excited to see those. I know there's still some way to go for sure. And if you're not at work right now and you're trying to get back into the workplace, again, pop your question in. Let's bring the value of this community. Let's bring some ideas to you. Try to help you in that journey. Until next time, I want you to remember that you have value. You're unique, and the community needs you to be who you are and to do what you do best. We want you to perform in your zone of genius where you're better than anyone else. Thank you for your time, and I will catch you next time. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.